To understand the background of the Kansas-Nebraska Act, it's important to understand that the availability of fertile land in the area in the West made it necessary to create a territorial infrastructure to allow for settlement. This is because settlers would not move there as they could not legally hold a claim on the land, only possible if those areas were organized into territories by an act of Congress. However, the legislation that Congress needed to pass to deal with these measures was halted because politicians couldn't agree on whether the railroad should take a northern or southern route, and most importantly, they couldn't agree on the expansion of slavery into these newly organized lands. So what happened? On January 4, 1854, Stephen Douglas wanted to ensure a northern transcontinental railroad route that would benefit his Illinois constituents. He introduced a bill to organize the territory of Nebraska in order to bring the area under civil control. But Southern senators objected. The region lay north of the latitude 3630, and so under the terms of the Missouri Compromise of 1820, would become a free state. To gain the Southerners' support, Douglas proposed creating two territories in the area, Kansas and Nebraska, and repealing the Missouri Compromise line. Finally, the Kansas-Nebraska Act was passed by the United States Congress on May 30th, 1854. It allowed people in the territories of Kansas and Nebraska to decide for themselves whether or not to allow slavery within their borders. The act also served to repeal the Missouri Compromise of 1820, which prohibited slavery north of latitude 3630. Its purpose was not only to resolve the territorial organization and infrastructure development of the western lands, but also to help preserve a fledgling union. Ironically said, because this act did everything but help the fledgling union. Many white Northerners opposed the Kansas-Nebraska Act in its final form. Salmon Chase, a senator from Ohio, denounced the bill, believing that slavery violated Christian concepts. Some opponents objected to slavery on moral grounds, while other people simply did not want to compete economically with slave owners if slavery was permitted in Kansas and Nebraska. Additionally, the Whig Party's members split along regional lines, with Northern Whigs opposing it and Southern Whigs endorsing its legislation. The Whig Party collapsed as a result of the regional divisions caused by the Kansas-Nebraska Act, with the Northern branch becoming the modern-day Republican Party. Finally, the northern states also became more lax in their enforcement of the Fugitive Slave Act, which further enraged the South. The South, on the other hand, was appreciative that the Kansas-Nebraska Act repealed the Missouri Compromise of 1820, which allowed for the expansion of slavery into western lands. However, the South was upset that northern states started to lax their enforcement of the Fugitive Slave Act in retaliation for the passage of the Kansas-Nebraska Act. These differing views on the act, along with further separation of the two regions, especially ideologically and culturally, helped cause the Civil War.
Bleeding Kansas. Bleeding Kansas was a direct impact from the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Slavery could only be decided through popular sovereignty, a vote strictly from territorial residents. Settlers from the North and South flocked into Kansas to represent their views. Majority of those from the North supported the Free Soil movement, whose goal was to prevent slavery from spreading into the Western Territory. To counter the North, Southerners from Missouri flooded across their western border with Kansas to protect the institution of slavery, and were justly dubbed the name Border Ruffians. Due to their proximity advantage, the Border Ruffians had become very successful in manipulating early elections with many unregistered voters, and were able to elect a pro-slavery legislature for Kansas. The new pro-slavery legislature passed laws similar to the Missouri slave codes, which the Free Soilers protested by creating their own separate territorial legislature in Topeka. However, only the pro-slavery legislature, soon located in Lecompton, was recognized by President Pierce. During this time, violence began to brew, mostly from the Border Ruffians onto the northern settlers. The first major attack occurred on May 21st, 1856, when a mob of pro-slavery men raided the anti-slavery town of Lawrence. The mob proceeded to torch and ransack the homes and establishments of innocent Lawrence settlers! A response to their attack was then organized by John Brown. John Brown was a staunch advocate of abolition, but many of his views were seen as too radical for the time. John Brown decided to visit the pro-slavery town of Potawatomi with a group of his followers, including 4 of his sons. The group continued to kidnap 5 prisoners from their homes and hack them to pieces with swords. And yeah, his sons were there too! If that's not quality father-son bonding, then I don't know what is. Now, the last major bloodletting was done by a group of border ruffians who killed 5 Free State supporters in an event called the Marais des Cygnes Massacre. We'll go with that. Anyway, many Americans were divided over the constituents of violence. Northerners saw the border ruffians as lawless savages who pillaged innocent Kansas settlements, while many in the South saw them as heroes for protecting the Southern way of life. John Brown's actions were applauded by some, but he was largely ignored and deemed a radical by the North, while in the South, Brown was seen as a terrorist for his executions. The events in Bleeding Kansas had polarized much of the nation, and by the time Kansas was accepted into statehood in 1861, America was already on the brink of civil war.